My neighbor's experiment turned me into a girl. My name's Alex, and I've always considered myself pretty ordinary. I'm 19, and like most guys my age, I spend my time playing video games, hanging out with my friends, and pretending I have my life figured out. But deep down, there's always been something more I've never quite understood. It all started one quiet evening when I bumped into my new neighbor, Dr. Harris. He wasn't your average guy. There was something different about him, something almost eccentric. He was a scientist, or at least that's how he introduced himself. When he first started talking to me about his work, I wasn't sure what to make of it. But then he told me about his experiment. It wasn't anything illegal, he assured me. He wanted to explore human behavior and the mind's response to physical transformation. He had this idea, this theory, that he'd been testing in the lab, and he wanted to use me as a subject. He was quick to assure me that it would only take a day, maybe two. A small, harmless experiment. I didn't know it then, but agreeing to help him would lead me down a path that would completely change my life. What was at stake? Well, everything. My identity, my comfort zone, my sense of who I was, the idea of being transformed into someone else, someone completely foreign to me, seemed insane. But part of me couldn't help but be intrigued. It was a chance to break free, to challenge myself. But I had no idea that in saying yes, I was stepping into a world where nothing would ever be the same again. The moment Dr. Harris laid out his idea, I felt a chill run down my spine. I could tell by the way he spoke that he wasn't trying to trick me, but everything about his proposal seemed wrong. He spoke about his experiment with such passion, as if he truly believed in the possibility of what he was offering me. He promised me that it would only last a couple of days, that I wouldn't feel any permanent effects, and that I'd be compensated for my time. But there was something unsettling about the whole situation. He wanted me to be part of an experiment that would completely alter my appearance, my body, make me into something else. It wasn't just a physical change. It was as if I would be stepping into someone else's skin. Someone who wasn't me. I found myself hesitating. My mind raced. I'd never considered something like this before. Was this what people did when they needed to feel alive? Did they sign up for something crazy, something dangerous, just to break out of their routine? But what if it worked? What if, for once, I could be someone else? Someone who wasn't bound by expectations, who didn't have to carry the weight of a life that felt too small for me. The thought was thrilling, but at the same time, it was terrifying. I imagined waking up the next day, looking in the mirror, and not recognizing myself. What if I didn't want to go back? What if I didn't even want to be the person I was before? Then there was the fear of what could go wrong. What if the experiment didn't work the way he promised? What if I couldn't go back? I kept asking myself, what's the worst that could happen? But the truth was, I had no idea. I could lose everything. My life, my sense of self, everything I thought I knew could disappear. But as I stood there, listening to Dr. Harris's calm assurances, a part of me, a small, daring part, wanted to say yes. I wanted to take the leap and see where it led. Could I really go through with it? Could I face the consequences? I couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Harris's offer. It haunted me, even in the silence of my room at night. The thought of waking up with a new body, a new identity, felt both electrifying and terrifying. I kept imagining what it would feel like, the new sensation of walking in someone else's shoes, the rush of living a life I hadn't planned. But every time I allowed myself to entertain the idea, doubts crept in, uninvited and insistent. What if I didn't recognize myself? What if I couldn't go back? What if I lost who I was in the process? I decided to talk to my closest friend, Marcus, about it. We'd known each other for years, and I trusted him with my life. But as I explained Dr. Harris's plan, I could see the concern written all over his face. "Are you out of your mind?" he asked, his voice tense. "You can't just change like that. Who knows what it'll do to you? You're messing with things you don't understand." I stared at him, suddenly defensive. But what if it's exactly what I need? What if I'm stuck in a life that doesn't fit me anymore? I just want to explore, do something different. He shook his head, his expression softening. "I get it. You want to change. But this is dangerous. You don't even know what he's really doing. You're gambling with your life, and for what? A few days of being someone else." I sighed, the weight of his words sinking in. He was right about one thing. I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know the full extent of Dr. Harris's experiment or the consequences of agreeing to it. But something deep inside me stirred. The desire for transformation, the temptation to escape my reality, felt so overpowering that I couldn't push it away. I thought about how my life had felt like it was on pause. My job, my relationships, it was all so predictable. Nothing ever surprised me. But could I really risk everything just for a fleeting experience? That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. I thought about calling Dr. Harris, telling him I was ready to go ahead with the experiment, but I hesitated. What if it was a mistake? What if it was the last decision I ever made? The next day, I walked through my office building in a fog, barely aware of the familiar faces around me. I could hear snippets of conversation, but they felt so far away, like I was drifting through someone else's life. My thoughts kept swirling back to the experiment. I had an hour before the meeting with Dr. Harris. Just as I was about to decide, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. I heard you were thinking about doing something big. Just make sure you know what you're getting into. Some choices you can't undo. The text sent a shiver down my spine. It felt like a warning, a sign from the universe. Was this my chance to make a dramatic change, or was I about to make the biggest mistake of my life? I stood at the edge of a precipice, the ground beneath me shaking. Did I take the leap, or turn back before it was too late? I sat in my car, staring at the text from my mom. Her words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the gravity of what I was about to do. Some choices you can't undo. The weight of that phrase crushed me, each letter a reminder that I was teetering on the edge of something irreversible. I glanced at the time, only 30 minutes left before my meeting with Dr. Harris. I could turn back now. I could text him and tell him I wasn't ready, that I needed more time. Or I could go in, sign the papers, and let the experiment unfold. But would I regret it? Would I always wonder what could have been if I didn't take the chance? I thought about my life, my boring routine, the monotony that had settled in like a fog. What if I stayed the same? What if nothing changed? Would I continue feeling trapped in this life that didn't seem to fit me anymore? Was the risk worth it? Dr. Harris had said the transformation was temporary, that I could return to my old life once it was over. But could I? And what would it mean to be someone else for a while? Would I finally discover what was missing from my life? Or would I just lose myself in the process? The decision pressed down on me like a heavy weight, the consequences of either path stretching out before me, uncertain and vast. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the finality of the moment sinking in. I took a deep breath, typed a quick message to Dr. Harris, "I'm in." And with that, my journey began. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The reflection staring back at me was someone I didn't quite know, someone I had only imagined in fleeting moments of fantasy. Dr. Harris's lab had an almost clinical feel to it, sterile and cold, yet the soft lighting and gentle hum of the machines gave it a strange sense of calm. As he applied the first of many injections, I felt an odd twinge of anticipation mixed with fear. The change was gradual at first, subtle shifts that I almost dismissed as my imagination. My skin tingled as if it were waking up from a long sleep, and I noticed the slight tightening around my chest, like something shifting just beneath the surface. I hadn't expected the physical side effects to be so immediate. I reached up, touching my face, half expecting the old me to still be there, but instead, the smoothness of my skin was undeniable. I could hear Dr. Harris explaining the process, his voice distant as I was caught in my own reflection. It's a series of microstimulations to your cells. You'll notice some changes within the first hour. He said it so matter-of-factly, as though turning into someone else for a while was an everyday occurrence. But it wasn't. Not for me. I clenched my hands into fists as the changes started to intensify. My waist seemed to shrink in response to the hormones, the tightness of my jeans more pronounced now, pressing against my hips where they hadn't before. It felt strange, almost alien, to be growing in a direction I hadn't anticipated. My body was becoming something that no longer felt like me, but like someone else entirely, someone who wasn't afraid to be beautiful, to embrace softness, to be feminine. My mind raced to keep up. It wasn't just my body that was changing, but my thoughts, too. The more I felt the transformation happening, the more the world around me seemed to shift. The idea of who I was became less concrete. Who was I without the past? Without the version of myself that had always been unsure of who I was meant to be. I glanced at Dr. Harris again. His expression was impassive, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, satisfaction, perhaps, or even curiosity. The truth was, he was just as much a part of this experiment as I was, though he was standing on the sidelines, watching me evolve into something new. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly, though his voice sounded distant, like a stranger's voice coming from far away. I wanted to respond, to tell him that I was scared, that this wasn't what I had expected. But instead, I just nodded, my lips curving into an unfamiliar smile. The reflection in the mirror seemed to smile back at me, someone new, someone daring. And just like that, something shifted within me. The fear began to dissipate, replaced by a strange, exhilarating sense of freedom. I was becoming someone else, but in a way, I was finally becoming myself, someone I had buried deep inside for years. The changes weren't just physical anymore. They were emotional, too. The more I saw my new self, the more I felt the weight of all the years I had spent hiding who I was, who I could be. In that moment, I realized that the transformation wasn't just about the external appearance. It was about shedding the layers of insecurity and fear, allowing myself to be seen for who I was meant to be. I stood at the entrance of the party, the music pulsing through the floor, vibrating in my chest. People were scattered across the room, laughing, talking, their voices rising in a blend of energy and excitement. It should have felt normal, like any other gathering, but tonight, everything was different. I was different. I had stepped out of Dr. Harris's office hours ago, transformed in more ways than one. The clothes I wore, this little black dress that hugged my curves in all the right places, felt like a second skin. I could see the glances, the surprised stares, as I walked past groups of people. No one knew who I was. They only saw the new me. My hands trembled as I adjusted the strap of my dress. The world had shifted, but I hadn't fully realized how much it would change until now. What was this new version of me? What was I doing here, surrounded by faces I didn't recognize? Suddenly, someone called out my name. "Elliot!" I froze. My heart skipped a beat. I turned toward the voice, my pulse hammering in my ears. It was Michael, the one person who knew me, the real me, before this all started. He looked at me in confusion, his brows furrowing as if trying to place my face. "Michael," I said softly, stepping closer to him. My voice sounded strange, higher, smoother than it ever had before. His eyes darted across me, his confusion deepening. Is that really you?" I nodded, but my mind was racing. The weight of the decision hit me full force. How long could I keep this up? How long could I pretend to be someone I wasn't, even if I'd become a version of myself that felt more real than the person I had been before? Michael looked like he wanted to say something, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. His mouth opened, then closed again. "Why? Why are you doing this, Elliot?" The question struck harder than I'd expected. It wasn't just about the clothes or the transformation. It was about everything that led me here, the years I'd spent hiding from myself, the secrets I'd kept even from those closest to me. "I don't know who I am anymore," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "But I think I'm starting to figure it out." For a brief moment, the crowd around us seemed to fade away. It was just Michael and me, standing on the edge of my new reality. But the silence was short-lived. A voice from across the room interrupted. "Elliot!" It was Dr. Harris. I turned toward him, feeling the pressure mount. What now? Was this the point of no return? Would I go back to the life I once knew, or was this, the path I was meant to follow? As I stood there, caught between my old life and this new, uncertain path, I realized just how far I'd come. The person I had been, quiet, unsure, wrapped up in my own insecurities, felt like someone I could barely recognize now. In their place was someone new, someone who had faced the impossible, embraced change, and learned to live in the uncertainty of it all. Looking at Michael, I saw the hesitation in his eyes, but also something more, acceptance. In his confusion, there was no judgment, no condemnation. It was as if, in his eyes, I was still the same person, just different. And that's what I'd learned in all of this. Transformation isn't just about physical changes. It's about embracing who you truly are beneath it all. even when the world isn't ready to understand. It's about pushing past the fear of rejection and accepting that sometimes the hardest part isn't changing, it's allowing yourself to be changed. I thought about Dr. Harris, about how this experiment wasn't just for his research. It was a mirror I never knew I needed, showing me the parts of myself I'd buried deep down. It wasn't easy, and I still had moments where I felt like I was living in someone else's skin. But now, there was a quiet confidence within me that hadn't existed before. As I looked toward the future, the uncertainty didn't seem so daunting. The path ahead might still be unclear, but I was no longer afraid of the journey. I was ready to explore it, to find where this new version of me would lead. And maybe, just maybe, that's all I needed to do, take the next step, no matter where it led.